In this set of notes, we're going to start our introduction of biology, looking at what is biology, what makes something alive, what does it mean to be alive. So first of all, biology is the study of life, how things function as they're alive, what makes them alive, how do they interact. So a couple of questions I would like for you to think about. How does biology affect your daily life? And how does biology affect the world around you? So as we look at these pictures, are all of these things alive? What are some of these things? Probably the most obvious in the middle is some sort of embryo. Throughout the year, we will talk about new life. When we talk about evolution, we'll look at the fact that a lot of different organisms look very similar as embryos. When we look at this picture, what do we see? Are these things alive? Often students think that this is a picture of something that looks like carrots, but it's actually a fungus growing on a tree. How are those things alive? This is a video that I show my students every year to introduce the characteristics of life. It's just a cute little song, so enjoy, and then we will discuss the characteristics of life.
Beets, of course, it's not alive. Yes, crystals grow, but that does not make them alive. Living things have special orders for them. It's the study of biology. If something's alive, then we can see that it's a part of biology. It could be a fish, a frog, or a mule. It could be a teacher at your school. So how do we know if something's alive? I tell you, there are 7 things it needs to survive. If something's alive, then it cells divide because of its action of the nucleotide. It's not a rock, a stone, or a key. That would be geology. So how do we know if something's alive? There are 7 things it needs to survive. It's got to grow. It's got to move and stay loose. It's got to eat. It's got to reproduce. It's got to respond to stimuli. It's got to breathe or it will die. Now the last one is kind of discreet. It's got to excrete. Biology. That's the study of the life we see. Biology. The science of life is biology. Look at all the cells in it. It's all part of life. DNA, molecules. How do you know if something's alive? There are 7 things it needs to survive. It's got to grow. It's got to move and stay loose. It's got to eat. It's got to reproduce. It's got to respond to stimuli. It's got to breathe or it will die. And the last one, it's a kind of discreet. If it eats, it's got to excrete. Biology. That's the study of you and me. Biology. The science of life is biology. The study of life that we see. Biology. The science of life is biology. The geeks, the frogs, the newts, and the cats. Everybody that knows where it's at. Monkeys and dogs and pigs and mules.
So we'll look at all of the different characteristics of life and discuss what they mean and how they relate to organisms. So first of all, organization. So this is the order that an organism is laid out, whether it's internal or external, or how they interact with the living world. The level of organization for an organism starts with the smallest being an atom. Those atoms then make up molecules, which make up organelles, which make up cells, and so on. And we'll talk about each of these levels in just a moment. So looking at organisms themselves, organisms can be very large or very small, looking at things like bacteria all the way to whales or elephants, looking at plants, fungus, all of those different types of organisms. If we then go down one level from an organism, we're going to look at what are called organ systems. So a lot of these you're probably familiar with. In the human body, we've got several: circulatory system, muscular system. Not all organisms are going to have all of the same organ systems. Some may have all of the same, some may have a few, or some organisms may not have any of these that are similar to us. Breaking down organ systems, those are made of organs. And so these are special functions that carry out a specific system, a specific job, you could say. When we look at humans, we've got lungs, we've got intestines, eyes, brain, all of those things are going to be organs. Organs are made up of tissues, which are groups of cells. We have different types of cells in our body, so cells that are similar and do the same job are going to be called tissues. So we'll look a lot this year at cells. So the cells are the smallest unit that can perform all of life's processes that actually meet all of the characteristics of life. So the cell is the smallest unit that can be considered alive. Going down, looking at specific types of cells, we've got unicellular or multicellular. So a unicellular organism is going to be a single-celled organism that can function on its own. A multicellular organism is going to be an organism that's made up of lots of different types of cells. Within cells, we have organelles. So a lot of times you can think of these as kind of the organs of a cell or the cell parts. And we'll spend much more time on organelles. We look at plant cells versus animal cells. A lot of similar parts, and there are a few parts that are different. Breaking down organelles, we have biological molecules. So these are chemical compounds that help our cells function, that do things like create energy and food for our body. The smallest part of the organization of an organism is the atom. Atoms are the smallest unit of matter. So if we break down atoms, then we just have nuclear parts. So each different type of atom is going to be called an element. A lot of times people get atoms and elements confused. What's the difference? Atoms are the smallest parts of matter, whereas elements are just different types of atoms. So if you think of going down the cereal aisle at Walmart, there's lots of different types of cereal, which would be like your atoms, but each individual type of cereal, Captain Crunch, Frosted Flakes, Raisin Bran, those would be like the elements: hydrogen, oxygen, silver. The next characteristic of life is response to stimulus. So a stimulus is something that causes a reaction in our body, whether that's internal or external. So for example, if we touch something that's hot, and then our body's ability to respond and drop that hot item. Maybe we have a sharp pain in our side, the ability to feel that, our body to fix that, whatever that might be. Those are called response to stimulus. Sometimes we hear about people that can't feel pain, which sounds like a cool thing, But if we can't feel pain, we can't respond to that stimulus and fix whatever might be causing us pain. Homeostasis is the next characteristic of life. So homeostasis basically means your stable condition. So our body needs to be able to control itself so that we can maintain that stable condition. So if maybe we're too hot, can our body cool us down by sweating? Or maybe we're too cold and our body can heat us up by shivering. Very similar to in our house, we have a thermostat which helps keep things just the perfect temperature. Does it turn on the AC? Does it turn on the heater when it needs to? So homeostasis is our body's ability to keep our stable condition. The next type of characteristic of life is called metabolism. And a lot of times we think of metabolism in terms of gaining or losing weight. We have a fast metabolism that allows us to burn fuel and not put on a lot of weight. But actually, our metabolism is our body's control of the chemical reactions in our body, transferring energy and using that. So it does play a part in gaining and losing weight, but it's more than that. It's the control of energy and materials in our body. Cell division, this is going to look at growth and development. So cells need to be able to create new cells and divide. So if our cells can't grow and divide, then they wouldn't be very useful. So cell division is going to be taking one cell and making two new cells. Cell development is looking at changing over time, growing, our bodies growing from an infant to an older person. And what are the cells doing as that's happening? Reproduction, important for organisms. When we look at reproduction, we'll look at sexual and asexual. So organisms need to be able to recreate themselves, whether that's copies or similar offspring. So first we have sexual reproduction. With sexual reproduction, we're going to have two organisms from the same species that will combine, and their offspring will be similar to the parents, but not identical. And later on, we'll talk here about why it's important that we have that variety and not be identical to our parents. The next type of reproduction is asexual reproduction. So in asexual reproduction, the original organism is going to make a copy of itself. And we'll talk later about why that's important to have identical copies versus offspring that is similar but not identical. In the cell, we have DNA, which is the blueprint for the organism. Those genes are carried on the DNA, and the genes are the instructions of how an organism should look, how it reacts, different specific traits of the organism. And then the last characteristic of life is change through time. Adaptation, evolution, diversity. And we'll spend a whole chapter talking about these things. Why is it important for things to adapt? If we look at the dogs in these pictures, they're all dogs, but they're probably different types of dogs than were around 500 years ago. Maybe there's some similarities, but we breed dogs for different purposes. So adaptation is a good thing. Evolving. Why do things evolve? Do we have proof that things evolve? We'll talk a lot about that. And then diversity. Why is diversity important in life and in our ecosystem overall?